I believe that representation matters, but I especially love to see great representation when it comes to romance books, especially when it is mental health related, because I do believe that we all deserve to see ourselves as romantic leads that are capable of receiving love and giving love regardless of any mental condition that we may or may not struggle with. So this is why today in this video, I want to recommend to you guys a multitude of books that have various mental health conditions where the leads or the characters surrounding the leads have some kind of condition that they are struggling with, whether it is diagnosed or not diagnosed. Okay, welcome guys. If you're new here, my name is Vanessa. If you're not new here, welcome back. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started into this video. I originally wanted to divide this into whether or not they are diagnosed, not diagnosed, whether it's anxiety, ADHD, PTSD, all of that good stuff. But I realized that this was going to be kind of an awkward way to do things. So I'm just going to go ahead and recommend books as they come. And I will have books listed in the timeline, so you'll be able to see in what order the books are recommended. All right. Okay. So the first book I want to recommend is actually a historical romance, and it is Devil in Spring by Liese Kleypas. So in this book, we are following Pandora and Gabriel. Pandora is a debutante. She is a young lady making her debut in high society, but she's not happy about it. She is forced to make her debut with her twin sister, but because she gets bored and she's not interested, she decides to help out a friend who's in a sticky situation. But by helping the friend during this whole ball, she ends up in a scandal with one of the most notorious rake in town, which is Gabriel. And he is at first reluctant because now he's avoided being trapped into a marriage situation for the longest time. But then once he meets her and gets to know Pandora, he's like, oh, okay, yes, I definitely want her as my wife. But she's like, no, I don't want to be anyone's wife. And this book, obviously, it's from, way back in the day. So there's no official diagnosis for it. But Pandora is very aware that she's not like the other girls because she knows that she's very scatterbrained. She can't concentrate on stuff. She gets distracted very easily. She realizes that some of those characteristics about herself would not make for a good wife, which is responsible for taking over a whole household and managing, people. So she instead wants to be a businesswoman where she wants to market a board game that she has developed, right? That's what she wants to do. But after much convincing from Gabriel, she agrees to become his wife, but she also wants to maintain autonomy and keep her business going. What she doesn't realize is that this business is actually putting her life in danger, and now Gabriel has to figure out a way to keep her alive and safe. So it's such a beautiful story. I really, really enjoyed it. I think you guys will love it too, to get to see how it would be like if you had this condition back in the day and how this would affect you. I think the author did a great job at showing how, yes, even though at the time people didn't really have to work, at least the young ladies in high society, but they had responsibilities, and having a condition like this would make it very difficult for them. So I really, really enjoyed this book. Chef's kiss. I recommend it. Now, the next book I want to recommend is Daydream by Hannah Grace. In this book, we are following Henry and Holly. Henry is captain of the hockey team, and Holly is another student at the same college. She is very studious. She's a people pleaser. She's an elder sister. So she's really used to taking over and being responsible for everyone. She also wants to be a romance writer, but she hasn't dated much, so she doesn't have a lot of experiences. So her book is kind of falling flat, and she's not able to articulate experiences that she hasn't had. On the other hand, we have Henry here, who is doing very well in school except for one subject, but despite that he's not at risk of failing, his coach wants him to get his grade up in that one class because as captain of the hockey team, he needs to set an example. So when Holly finds out that he is struggling, she decides that she wants to help him because that's what she does. She's a people pleaser, she's a help her. And then Henry decides that, well, he wants to be able to help her in return. So he's going to take her out on dates to basically help her broaden her dating horizon so she can write her book. And from there, we see a friendship blossom, but then it definitely evolves to more, and we see some romantic relationship develop from that. I really, really enjoyed this book. I definitely saw myself in both characters, which is so hard to do sometimes. I saw myself in Holly as an older sister, as a people pleaser, as someone who wants to give but sometimes gets overwhelmed by, stretching herself too thin, but also saw myself in Henry as someone who can excel at certain things, but other things it's very hard to do. The way if something is not interesting to him, he cannot activate himself to go ahead and do it. He procrastinates a lot. He can be also very scatterbrained. He forgets stuff. So it definitely saw myself a lot in Henry. This was really, really good. I really enjoyed this. I would definitely recommend. This one is on the slower burn. I know that a lot of people did not like Icebreaker because it was a little too smutty, and then some people may not have liked Wildfire because it is the one night stand trope. This one took a little while to start if you're worried about the how smutty it may be. It definitely more on the slow burn side, but really enjoyable. The next book that I'm going to recommend is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This is a very recent read for me. And this one, we are following Rue and Eli. Rue is a biotech scientist. She is working for this company where she's working in the preservation of food. But she's a little bit different, and she recognizes this about herself. She doesn't understand social cues. It's really hard for her to have friends. She only has one best friend, Tisha. She really finds it hard to be around people. So she's not officially diagnosed, but we can tell that she may be on some sort of spectrum. And because human interactions are so hard for her, she's decided that she doesn't want to be in a relationship. She understands that she may have some needs. So she uses dating apps where she can meet men, take care of her needs, and then that's it. And she doesn't do any repeats. So one night she goes on the app, she meets Eli, and they decide to meet. They do meet up. However, nothing happens because something interrupts them, and then they go their separate ways. Except the next morning when she shows up at work, who does she see? Eli, because he's part of this company who is potentially trying to take over the company that she works for. And now she's labeled Eli as enemy number one because he potentially could be taking away all her life's work. Eli is immediately smitten by her, so he's like, I don't care about the fact that I potentially be taking over your company, well, the company that you work for. I want to be with you. And she's like, no, that's not going to work. It is actually such a beautiful story. I really enjoyed it. A lot of people were worried about this one or did not like this one because of how smutty it is supposed to be. And even Ali Hazelwood described this as her erotica novel. However, I do think that this was really well done. It is very lusty, insta-lusty, but it's not insta-smutty. And also, there's a lot of depth to these characters. We really get a good understanding of Rue and see what her challenges are when it comes to connecting with people, communicating with people, having people around her. And I love the way Eli immediately is taken by her and does not care and embraces everything that she seems to think is not good about herself. Eli embraces and loves. So really, really loved this one. The next book that I'm going to recommend is With You Forever by Chloe Liese. Now, in this book, we are following Rooney and Axel. Axel is the eldest brother in the Bergman Brothers series. This is book number 4. It's an interconnected series, so you don't need to read the other books to understand this one. Rooney has always had a crush on Axel because her best friend is actually dating Axel's brother. They're engaged at this point in the book. And so she's often around Axel, even though he definitely tries his best to not be around her. One particular night, they are at one of the Bergman brothers' party and they are playing, I believe it's charade, and she ends up kissing him. And right after the kiss, he disappears. So she believes that he was so mortified by the kiss that he wants nothing to do with her. But a couple weeks later, she's having to leave law school because she's dealing with some health issues and she needs to take a break. Her best friend suggests that she goes to this cabin that the Bergman brothers use. And so she's like, there's gonna be no one there, don't worry, because the siblings have the cabin I think it's like 1 week at a time or 1 month at a time. And she's like, none of the brothers are going to be there. No one is going to be there. You can have the cabin and basically take that time to figure out what you want to do. Except what she doesn't tell her, that technically, even though Axel is not going to be there, this is Axel's time to be there. So she doesn't tell her that she's sending her into the lion's den. And of course, when Rooney shows up, Axel is there and she has to interact with him. And of course, it's awkward for him. A couple more things happen and it ends up that in order to save the day, Rooney has to agree to marry Axel. So we're having also marriage of convenience in this one. It was so beautiful. I really, really enjoyed this. Chloe did such a good job at showing how it's important to be able to be loved regardless of condition. So in this one, we have the potential mental health condition that Axel has. He definitely is very aware of all his challenges. He doesn't like loud noise. He finds social cues very difficult to understand. He doesn't express his emotions the way other people do. He's not able to love the way other people do. So he's convinced himself that he would never find someone to share this recluse life that he has. And then Rooney on the other side is dealing with a lot of digestive issues, so she thought that having a romantic relationship would also be difficult. And to see them come together and love each other and accept each other, amazing, beautiful. I loved it. I think you guys should definitely read it. Chloe Liese does a great job when it comes to autism, ADHD, representation. She's a good one for that. Speaking of which, I also want to recommend another book by her, which is actually the second book in the Bergman Brothers series. It is Always Only You. And in this book, there's actually an official diagnosis. So in this book, we're following Ran, which is one of the Bergman brothers, and Frankie. Ren is a hockey player. He plays for a big NHL team, and he is this big, soft guy who has been pining after Frankie since the minute she started working for the team. But because he didn't want her to feel like she has a conflict of interest or make things difficult for her, he was just biding his time and waiting for an opportunity. And when he finds out that Frankie is actually going to be leaving the team because she's going to start, I believe, law school, he decides it's his time to go ahead and convince Frankie that, they could have something special. Now, Frankie is not interested at all into a relationship because she has autism. She is diagnosed, and she's found that a lot of time people have basically taken her autonomy and her authority away from her because they're always trying to baby her and kind of like cradle her. So she doesn't want a relationship where her independence is taken away from her. So she is not interested in dating. However, because of circumstances that are beyond her control, she ends up having to go ahead and live with Ran, and you have this forced proximity that gives them the opportunity to get to know each other, and from there a beautiful romance blossoms. I absolutely love this one. I loved it even more than With You Forever. This is my favorite one, and that's because Rand is just such a cutie pie. He is absolutely a gunner when it comes for Frankie, and I love that, but also because he's had to get a chance to learn and observe her. And when people saw her as like an ice queen, he automatically could see through the challenges that she was facing and why she was like this. Even though he didn't fully understand like her diagnosis, he didn't know that she had this condition before, but he automatically could see through the whole thing, and he like fell in love with her immediately. So I loved that book. This was like basically a 4.5 star for me. I highly recommend. Definitely pick this one if you're gonna pick one of them up. Speaking of down bad guy, I am going to recommend Play Along by Liese Tomforde, because it's kind of similar in terms of like the tropes. So in this one, we are following Isaiah and Kennedy. Isaiah is a baseball player, and he has been pining after Kennedy since she started working for their team, not as a social media manager, but as one of the sports medicine coach for 3 years also, which is funny enough. And so, but Kennedy is not giving him the time of day. When she first joined the team, she was actually engaged, so she was definitely not giving anyone any play or any attention. And even though Isaiah was flirting with her, Isaiah didn't expect anything to happen out of it because, again, she was engaged. But then something happens, and he notices that Kennedy is not wearing her ring anymore, and he finds out that she's no longer in a relationship. So when they are away in Vegas for some trip, actually he's away because he's out with the boys celebrating the season that's about to start, and she is away because she's at a bachelorette party, and they see each other at a club, and they end up spending that night together because, you know, she's trying to get away from the bachelorette party for a reason you'll find out. And so they're spending the night in town just enjoying themselves. They get more and more drunk, and they end up getting married. So good, so good. So we have marriage of convenience there, because even though they get married by accident, they now can no longer get divorced, because if they do, or if they get the marriage annulled, Kennedy may lose her job and potentially get blacklisted and not be able to work in that field anymore. So they have to stay married. So good. This was so good, because immediately Isaiah's like, all right, I got my girl. I need to be able to keep her. Kennedy thinks, I'm going to be able to get out of this relationship eventually. And Isaiah's like, no, baby, you're not going anywhere. But Isaiah also has some trauma that he's dealing with. So he has a lot of anxiety, some PTSD going on there. And so we see him work through this also. And we see Kennedy help him work through this. And then Kennedy, I'm not going to call this a mental health condition. I think it's just her personality, but people have always seen that side of her personality as very cold, and Isaiah helped her work through that process also. It's such a beautiful story. This was an automatic 5-star for me. I know people really love this series, especially the second book in the series, which is The Right Move, but Play Along has definitely topped it for me. It is my favorite book in the series, and I absolutely cannot wait for the next one. But yes, highly recommend pick that one up. All right, so the next book that I'm going to recommend is The Kiss Quotient by Helen. Hoang. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I think whenever people think about book with autism, this is the first book that comes to mind when it comes to romance. In this book, we are following Stella and Michael. Stella has Asperger's syndrome. She works in this big company that is basically, I guess, the equivalent of like Amazon, where she does put together algorithms that help people decide their purchases. And so she's really good at her job, and she's very successful. However, her parents, tell her that they are ready to have babies, and they tell her that she needs to start working on it. And because she's so eager to please them, and she understands that, I guess she feels a little guilty that she is who she is and she has her condition, she decides that she's gonna go about it very methodically. So she's gonna get herself a boyfriend, which is eventually going to become her husband, which is eventually going to give her babies. But she struggled with human interaction, and especially in the bedroom. She hasn't enjoyed it. So she decides to hire a male escort that's going to teach her how to be physical so she can meet a man that she can connect with and then eventually get married. And this is where Michael comes in. Michael is a male escort, and when he meets her, he tells her that he does not do repeat, but after their first interaction, he is kind of like taken by her. He can't really explain it, but so he agrees to go ahead and continue the learning experience with her. And this is where he kind of learns that she has this condition, and this is why she struggles with it, and a beautiful romance in there ensues. And we also learn about Michael's side and why he's in that field to start with. It is so beautiful to watch Stella grow as a person, watch Stella figure out that she is capable of human interaction and enjoying certain aspect of physical human interaction. It was a really good story. I really highly recommend the Kiss Quotient. This is the first book that I read with those type of theme, and it definitely opened up my eyes to getting to understand this better. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. This is a solid 4-star for me, so highly recommend. The next book that I'm going to recommend is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. In this book, we are following Soledad and Judah. So Soledad is this amazing woman who is very talented when it comes to homemaking. She has the best recipes. She knows the best hack to clean, organize, budget. Basically, she's like Martha Stewart on steroids, and she's married, and she really thought that she had close to the perfect life. Things weren't perfect with her husband, but it was good enough, and she was building a beautiful life for her family and her 3 young daughters. Except somehow everything starts to fall apart in her life, and she has to figure out how to stand on her own and basically survive this big scandal and keep her life going for her and her daughters. But this is when Judah comes into the picture, and he is a single dad of 2 boys who are autistic, and he is the last person that she should be even thinking about dating because of how complicated their history is. But she has to figure out if it's worth to take the risk. Now, this is such a beautiful story. Not only we have great representation of autism because Judah's kids are autistic, and I love that because they were kind of like different on the spectrum. Adam and Aaron, they're twin boys, and they had different symptoms, they presented differently, I guess I should say. I wouldn't say symptoms, but like they presented differently. And I love that because it was able to show you the variety of the spectrum, that it's not so cut and dry. Some people will have certain abilities, some of them will have different things that they have challenges with, but they all have their own strengths. So I really love that. But also Judah, without being diagnosed, was able to express that he definitely saw a lot of himself in his kids, and he mentions that even though he's not diagnosed, he does believe that he is somewhere on the spectrum also, because he does have some challenges, and growing up he had some of the same challenges that his sons have. So that was really amazing to see also, because Judah is probably in his 40s in this book, and of course back in the day there was no way to diagnose these type of conditions, so he points that out. I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved how we saw how it is for the families that have to deal with kids that have the condition like this one. So that was a different aspect of it. So if you are a parent that have kids, or people in your life or kids that have on the spectrum, I do believe that this is a good book to read. The love story in there is very beautiful. I really enjoyed it. This is a really good one, so I would definitely pick it up. So the next book that I'm going to recommend is Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. In this book, we are following Skylar and Wes. Skylar is this country pop star. She is absolutely very famous. However, she starts to have this condition maybe she's always had it, but it's become very heightened. She's having a lot of social anxiety, and she starts to freeze when she is in public, during interviews, and this is causing a lot of turmoil, and basically she's finding it hard to be in the public eye now. So she's really struggling with this anxiety, and so she's decided that the only way for her to kind of get better is to kind of run away from the public eye for a little bit. So she decides to go to Rose Hill, where the main lead in the first book in the series, because this is an interconnected series and the first book was Wild Love, so she decides to go to Rose Hill, where Ford is building a recording studio, Rose Hill Studio, and she's gonna record an album there, take some time off, and basically kind of come back stronger. But when she gets there, the recording studio is not ready yet, and so she doesn't have a place to stay per se. So Ford tells her that she can stay in West's bunkhouse, which is kind of like this little shed that is living on his ranch. And West is a horse trainer, so he is immediately taken by her, and he decides that, okay, he agrees to let her stay on the ranch. And so while she's rebuilding herself and recording this album. It is such a good book. And this book also, West is a single dad. He has 2 kids, and he also has a son who is not verbal, I guess. He can speak, but he only speaks on certain occasion. And so that's also added another layer to it, because we have the similarity between Skylar, which normally can speak, but when she's in some situation where she has a lot of anxiety, she freezes up and she can't speak. Absolutely love this. This is kind of like on the mild side, I guess you should say, because even though it is mentioned, it is the catalyst to how the book starts. It's not very heavy on it, but I do think this is a really good book to show how social anxieties can paralyze you and can basically hinder you from, doing what you're supposed to do, having great experiences, or basically just even doing your job. So I really, really enjoyed this. Definitely, you know how Miss Silver does it. This is a very good book, so romantic, so tender. West is such a great male lead, because he does not push her, but he's definitely there for her. He's there as a friend, and he helps her take back her authority. So love this one. I highly recommend also pick it up. But my favorite book when it comes to anxiety has to be Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. In this book, we are following Brianna and Jacob. Brianna is a doctor. Jacob is also a doctor. Brianna was under the impression that she was going to be offered this position, basically head of the department at the hospital where she works. She's a very competent doctor. She thought that this was a given because no one else was more competent than her at the hospital, until Jacob is hired. And when he gets there, he is fumbling through. He is very awkward around people. His patients are dying left or right. They're basically calling him Dr. Death. And he has like an interaction with Brianna that is very stilted, and she gets very upset and walks away. And then he writes her a letter where he basically explained to her why that interaction was weird, why he reacted the way he reacted, and basically tells her like he suffers from anxiety and it's hard for him to like sometimes have normal interaction with people. It was so sweet. Like, I'm telling you guys the story right now and I'm like swooning because come on. And from there they build up this friendship, and then eventually he explained to her that he does need her help because he needs to pretend that he has a girlfriend so he can attend his brother's wedding. And so they agreed to fake date. So we also have some fake dating element in there. I love this book because the representation for anxiety was absolutely on point. It was so good. Like the little detail that Abby Jimenez found a way to include into this book that we don't think about, that anxiety is not just oh, you're anxious all the time. It's the how you prepare and how you live your life, like how you feel like you need to arrive maybe 10 minutes early because you're worried that you may be late. You're worried that you're not gonna know the area. How, oh my God, the little, I don't even want to tell you guys the little details because I feel like they matter so much in this book, and they were so important to kind of like put together how they fell in love. So I don't want to give you guys all the details, but this was absolutely amazing. 5 stars, highly recommend. If you pick up any other book in this, definitely I would say pick up yours truly, because this is flawless. I love this book. So the last book that I want to recommend is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. And the main reason is because both leads are on the spectrum on some level. One of them is diagnosed, the other one is not. So in this book, we're following Eve and Jacob. Eve is a whole brand of chaos. She starts stuff, doesn't finish it. She will start a career, gives up on it. She can never follow through on anything. And so she's this young lady who should have a career, should have a future ahead of her, but has no idea where she is going because she cannot put roots down or focused on anything. And so she is currently a wedding planner, but the wedding goes horribly wrong. And so she decides to give up on that career, but her parents are fed up with her at this point, and they're like, we are cutting you off financially. You will no longer receive money from the trust until you decide to focus. So she runs away and runs away, a whole adult. And when she like is driving around, she sees this bed and breakfast, and then she sees this sign that says that they're hiring. So she decides, hey, she's gonna go ahead and interview spontaneously, okay, because that's what she does. And when she gets there, the owner of the bed and breakfast is Jacob, and because she is chaotic, he's like, no, I'm not going to hire you. But while she's driving away after this failed interview, she hits Jacob and breaks his arm with her car. So now, even though he doesn't want to hire her, he has no choice but to hire her because she actually can cook and she's good at what she does, but he just didn't think like she was a good fit. But they start working together, and of course a romance starts from there. Jacob is on the spectrum. He is diagnosed, so for him it is like very hard to be around people who were kind of like Eve, because Eve is very loud, she's very expressive, she wears a lot of colors, and he feels like she was too chaotic for him. And then come to find out, as they start working together, he's noticing certain things about Eve that he starts to realize, hold up, she may herself be on the spectrum even though she's not aware of it, because she does certain things, like she does some stimming, other things that the book kind of explains better. I think it's a beautiful story just to see two characters on the spectrum, very different, so it kind of helps you see that it's not one size fits all when we're speaking of conditions like that, but also able to express love in different ways. It was absolutely really amazing. I really love this book. It is very lusty, very, very lusty. So if this is something that you're not into, I would stay away from that one because I do feel like it gets lusty very early. But great book, really, really enjoyed it. I would highly, highly recommend. So that's all I had for you guys today. Let me know if you've read any of those books, which one you've enjoyed, which one you're interested in picking up. If you like this video, if you'd like me to do another one as I continue to read and explore more books with those type of topics. Thank you so much, you guys, for sticking through till the end of the video. If you did, leave me a heart at the end in the comments, and I will see you guys on the next one. Like, subscribe, and share. Bye.